My name is Matthew Todd and welcome to Inside the Scale Up. This is the podcast for founders and executives in tech looking to make an impact and learn from their peers within the tech business. We lift the lid on tech businesses, interviewing leaders and following their journey from startup to scale up and beyond, covering everything from developing product market fit, funding and fundraising models to value proposition structure and growth marketing. We learn from their journey so that you can understand how they really work, the failures, the successes, the lessons along the way, so that you can take their learnings and apply them within your own startup or scale up and join the ever-growing list of high-growth UK SaaS businesses. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Really excited today to be joined by Kevin Beales, founder and CEO of MySalesCoach. Great to have you here.
And great to be here, Matt. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. Looking forward to the conversation, learning more about your startup journey and what it is that you're up to now. And like I always like to do, I always like guests to introduce themselves. Tell us a bit about your background. So yeah, over to you. What do we need to know about you and MySalesCoach?
Yeah, appreciate it. So MySalesCoach is my third SaaS startup, started just at the start of this year. We provide expert sales coaching as a subscription. So we match individuals and teams to an expert sales coach who can deliver personalized one-to-one coaching. I guess, that kind of was triggered by some of the challenges that I saw in my previous two startups. So I started my first SaaS company back in 2008. That was called the Test Factory. And then subsequently, after exiting the Test Factory, started a SaaS company called Refract.
Awesome. I think, certainly keen to hear learn more about that experience gathered on the way. I'm imagining third time in there, quite a lot of lessons learned that you'll be able to take from one to the other.
There are plenty of lessons learned, plenty of scars, plenty of mistakes that I hope I won't make again. And like anything, lots and lots of learnings along the way from those experiences.
Yeah, but I'm guessing pretty positive. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in it for a third time.
I must admit, I went through. Do I want to do this again? Am I ready to do this again? As I'm sure everyone listening knows, you're really, committing yourself probably to what might be a journey of up to 10 years. And I think, there is a little bit of an addiction there. I have promised this is the last time, but I think there is a little bit of addiction there of that thrill of starting something from scratch, against the world, making something happen, doing it as a team, delighting customers, all of those things, and all of the challenges that go with it is kind of probably slightly sadistically addictive, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But someone's got to do it, right?
Absolutely.
Tell us about your first startup, if you can, and the Test Factory. What did that one look like?
Yeah, so the Test Factory was an online assessment platform. So, we managed the delivery of online tests. We're going back to 2008 now as well. So, fairly early in the evolution of that market. So we managed everything from the delivery of those online tests, the question banks, managing those that were examined, and the marking, reporting, so on. We had some amazing customers. We worked with people like Microsoft, United Nations, a lot of them, a lot of the big educational publishers and the exam boards in the UK, but made a lot of mistakes along the way. It was a hard journey, in truth, and although we were fortunate and we had a successful outcome and we did build a good business, it was really hard, and we definitely learned a lot of lessons and have a lot of scars from that journey. Yeah,
what were some of the challenges you faced there with that first one, kind of going in fresh?
I think the number one, and there's definitely a long list here, but the number one was that we weren't truly building a complete SaaS platform. We were customizing projects on top of a SaaS platform. We were doing that because we'd taken on some funding. There was opportunities there. There was amazing customers there, but that needed unique customizations each time. And we didn't do that in a way that just allowed us to keep evolving the product. It did become lots of bespoke projects on top of a SaaS platform.
I see.
That gave us lots of challenges and headaches down the line. We were then managing lots of different projects and customers simultaneously rather than a single platform, and it made it just really truly hard to scale.
I see, because that just the maintenance overhead or the actual effort involved in even accepting a new customer?
Both. So we actually got to a situation where we had like an order book, if you like, of 12 months worth of work. Winning work was perhaps the easy bit. The delivery of those custom projects on top of our platform was hard and challenging, and as it was almost like running an agency or a software development company, which is not what we ever intended to be, or even what we were skilled and experienced at being able to do. So as you can imagine, projects overran, they took longer, and we got to the point where we had a year's worth of work, and we actually then at that point said, "This is madness. We need to stop selling." And we looked to totally re-engineer the whole platform, but it actually meant we had to stop selling to do that, and that was obviously tough.
So were you successful in that re-engineering? Did you emerge from that with a better platform that you could sell and scale?
We did, but ironically, that's actually what led to our exit. So towards the end of that project, having gone through that and taken everything that we'd learned and put into a new platform that would truly be scalable, that's when we got our acquisition approach from a company called GL Education. They're the largest provider of tests in schools. And here we were with this shiny platform with all of our learnings, with no existing customers on it. It became actually quite a compelling proposition for an acquirer at that point,
I see.
Particularly an acquirer that had a bit of a technical gap themselves.
Interesting. So what were they acquiring? Was it the technology then that was the main value add for them in that acquisition?
It was really, primarily, whilst we were fortunate with some amazing customers, they were definitely nice to have rather than essential for their journey. So it was really a tech-led acquisition. Absolutely.
And it's interesting, kind of, why do you think from kind of your perspective, didn't they have what you were building in-house if you were able to successfully re-engineer yourself? Were they just too big to do that? Didn't have the skills? What do you think that was?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. So they were a couple of years into a private equity cycle. They were looking at their own exit 2 or 3 years out.
Okay.
And there was obviously quite a time scale, especially with the expertise that we had and the team that we had, for them to do this themselves, which was definitely possible, but would have taken a lot of time, would have taken money, would have taken building out a team. And I think the acceleration of their own exit journey, as well as adding obviously some customers and income and revenue and the like. Yeah. So it was technology, it was team, as well as some of the revenue and customers that went with it. Yeah,
interesting. I think it's always really useful to look into the rationale for different types of acquisitions. As a startup founder, someone that works with startups as well, I think many founders can make a lot of assumptions about why they might be acquired, and I think it's always interesting to look at the fact that there are different reasons and motivations for it, and that's accelerated their own journey.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll come on to it in a second. I think our journey at Refract to exit was a little bit more orthodox, but definitely some really good learnings and experiences from that, which I'm sure we'll come on to. Yeah,
so I guess that's a natural segue then from the test factory to Refract. Then how long was it before did you jump straight into that, or was there a bit of a gap in between? How did that pan out?
So to say I jumped into it is probably a little bit of an underappreciation. So I agreed to stay with our acquirer for 18 months, or that was part of the original agreement. That lasted 3 months, and literally I then finished it at Christmas and started Refract on the 1st of January.
Wow.
So straight back into it, and I think I really had the itch to do something again. And if I'm absolutely honest as well, I think because it was so hard, and this wasn't the same second time round, because it had been so hard at the Test Factory, I was just really tired and exhausted and ready for something new. And I think that's why I did really jump into doing this again, and then try to take some of those lessons and do it all bigger and better the second time round.
Yeah, interesting. You went straight in with not much break at all. Then, by the sound of it. So with Refract, then what was the idea for that? And was that something that had been on your mind for a while? Had you already been kind of exploring the possibility of that with some other people, prospects?
Yeah, I think and I'm sure any founder listening to that, as soon as you get to the point of acquisition, it's very hard to not start thinking about what's next. And you naturally, we all think of lots of ideas all the time, but most of the time we're fully invested in what we're doing. But as soon as that's not the case, that all starts to come to life. So as you say, well, I mean, I did have a week off, but after a week off. You've got to have Christmas off. After a Christmas break, jumped straight back into it. And the reason for Refract, well, if I tell you what Refract is, we took sales conversations, analysed those sales conversations, and highlighted what is happening in each of those conversations using AI of where revenue is being won and lost, where are we building rapport, where is objections coming up, where is there commercial negotiations, where are competitors mentioned, and what do top performers do differently in their conversations. This really kind of came about from one of the things that frustrated me at the Test Factory, again, going back a long way now, was that in order to coach and improve the sales team, and my background was in sales, we were sitting alongside people on, what's now might be referred to as ride-alongs, and literally sitting alongside people on calls and demos, and then trying to retrospectively coach and talk about what happened. And it was highly ineffective, and I kind of felt like there has to be a better way. Started looking at what was done in other industries at this time, and this is before some of the competitors emerged in this field of companies that people might know who are listening, people like Gong and Chorus. But essentially came up with the concept of Refract to solve that problem. In truth, we actually tried to solve the problem of what we called the sales coaching dichotomy, which is that organizations cite coaching as the priority of their frontline sales managers. Countless studies that show that it's the most impactful thing that organizations and managers can do, and the difference it makes to development and outcomes. But yet, managers typically spend less than 5% of their time by their own admittance coaching, and actually then when you ask their team, it's even less than that. And that was the problem we set out to solve. In truth, we pivoted a little bit more away from that, because the bit that we couldn't solve, and that really comes on to ends up to why we founded MySalesCoach, is that we could never solve the problem of managers not having enough time to coach, or enough time to prioritize coaching against all the very time-sensitive things that managers are tasked to do. So we never solved that problem, and that in the early days of Refract gave us a real churn challenge. We would sign up lots of customers who were motivated to solve this problem. We'd capture their conversations. We'd surface moments where revenue is being won and lost, but no one was really listening to him or actioning them, because again, the problem of time hadn't gone away. So we had a fairly horrific churn challenge in the early days. I'd say really before we'd really found product market fit. And that's when we started pivoting more away of we've got to make things happen automatically here. We've got to provide insights, tell people what top performers do, share across organizations the champagne moments that happen, the times where competitors are being mentioned. And we started to create a platform that was really about automating the value that comes out of the black box of sales conversations, sharing them right across an organization, not just to a sales team, but providing insight in what worked. So it was quite a significant pivot from that original problem, which had the desired effect of totally change. We went from, as I say, fairly horrific levels of churn. I think we were at about 5% monthly churn at one point. and ended up with net revenue retention at around 120%. At the end of the journey.
Yeah, no, that's pretty decent. I think it's interesting to look at things from that churn perspective, because I think so many people obviously focus on the acquisition piece and then assuming that churn will just take care of itself, it will be fine, something they can deal with later. But can certainly become a constraint in a business if you're not careful, and it's a lot harder to win those customers back a second time round, isn't it?
Totally. I think, again, in fairness, we kind of fell into that trap that, it was all around acquiring customers, acquiring logos, being really excited about that, having enough success stories and really true great success stories amongst those clients that gave us the fuel and the energy that, we're winning, we're on to something. And then just this frustration that we're not growing as fast as we think we should be. When we hear all this great feedback from great customers and great logos, and then look at how quickly we're growing, feeling that we're doing so many things right, it was a lot of frustration. And the root cause really was that we were delighting some customers, but we weren't solving the problem for everybody, and that was giving us this big churn challenge.
I see. How obvious was that at the time? Were you one of those organizations that's got the metrics really on top of it, or was it kind of being surfaced later in other ways?
No, I think we were on top of it. In fact, I even recall a board meeting with our investors where they kind of almost says, will you stop just going on about churn all the time? And they were almost trying to focus on us on some of the positives and wins. So I think we knew. What took us a while is working out exactly how we were going to fix it.
I see.
So we knew we had a problem, and there was a number of things that we did. The first, as I say, was really start to look at where does the product value, where can we ensure we're providing product value to everybody, not just people that have the time to invest and listen to those sales conversations. So we knew by this stage, I guess, that what is captured in people's calls and conversations is golden and can have huge impact right across an organization. It's this black box that doesn't otherwise get revealed of what really happens in the front line that has huge value. How do we make sure we're surfacing that? So as I say, there was a lot of we need to make things happen automatically. We need to think about our core user as being someone that doesn't have the time to listen to that and needs to get immediate value. We also totally re-engineered our customer success team. We brought on a new head of customer success who totally re-engineered that team. And I think there was a lot of learnings again in that team. We were probably closer to being account managers than a customer success team in those early days before product market fit. And that made a huge difference. We put in all the right processes, and that made a huge difference. And then I think we were just more deliberate in our go-to-market of knowing exactly the kind of customers that we knew we would be a great fit for. And it was probably, we all point to a same moment where we had a team away day where, which will be late 2020, where we really felt like now we have got product market fit. There was almost that high five moment that we were all convinced, this is repeatable, this is scalable. We know exactly the kind of customers that we're delighting. We've got a repeatable process to really build and scale that. Unfortunately, within about 4 or 5 months, along came COVID, and we had a whole heap of customers that were in travel and recruitment and media and events and all of the industries that were really impacted. And we went through 6 pretty scary weeks of kind of where is this going, as we took call after call of can we cancel, can we pause, we're all in panic mode, all our team have been furloughed. We went through a scary 6 weeks before we kind of came out bigger and stronger the other side.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that's pretty scary, especially for those sectors. I know many people, myself, business owners that are in those spaces, and some of them just said, oh, it's okay, we're just going to stop for a couple of weeks and see what happens, which, as we all know, it took longer than a couple of weeks for some of those in-person events to come back. But yeah, interesting to hear that, just before that, you kind of felt that you got that product market fit, you got that repeatability in place. And I think, many people listen to this, I think would be interested to kind of know what that looked like in terms of, what were the elements that you think were missing before that you felt had kind of finally slotted into place, or, what didn't quite align before, perhaps, as another way of looking at it.
I think, again, kind of reflecting on it, it was that we knew we could create someone really excited about the problem that we were solving and the value of solving that problem. But we weren't winning customers with a product that we knew would work. We were reliant on them having time and maybe making a change to what they did and a change to their current process to get value, and making that change or getting them to commit that time. It was essentially where it fell down.
Yeah.
And I think, it was that kind of the combination of how do we know that we can delight every customer, whether they ever listen to a conversation or not, combined with where are what are the exact ideal customer profiles that we absolutely know we're going to be successful with, and we're going to be able to delight. It was the combination of those two things that, and the re-engineering of customer success, as I mentioned. That it was I would say that that was a 12 to 18 month journey from really appreciating the journey to really feeling like that we got that product market fit. It took a while.
Yeah, just to get that dialed in. And what did your own sales process and teams, look like at that stage? How were you trying to get the product out to market?
So I think this was the frustrating thing, because my background was sales. My co-founder's background was sales. So we were a very sales heavy business. We were obviously selling a product to sales leaders that was about improving performance of their sales teams. That was about actually making their sales conversations better. We had to be at the top of our game to be successful. And that was definitely what, from the very early days of Refact, we were good at. It was our background. The product actually helped us learn a lot, because, we started capturing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, ultimately millions of conversations, and really understanding what works. So, and we were we were almost totally driven by outbound in those days. Outbound was what we knew. And so we were driven by an outbound sales team, and that worked. And actually, I think this is where we had some of those early frustrations, is that we were winning customers and growing revenue, but then losing it out the other side, and left with this frustration we're not going fast enough. But fortunately that did all solve itself. And we got to some really strong growth in 2021 and subsequently.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I think that's really interesting, and good to hear a little bit more about what that approach looked like as well, and that outbound was so successful for you. I think one of my frustrations with a lot of clients that we work with, and you go to the various SaaS conferences, things like that, there's a lot of talk from very, very overfunded companies about the virtues of product-led growth. And I think it can lead a lot of founders in startup and scale-up stage to think that they can build it and people will come, and that's what product-led looks like, which is a misconception. So I think because of that, they can be a bit wary of going down an outbound route. So I think it's quite refreshing to hear someone talk, very positively about actually that's what you knew, that's what worked, and it can be a very good strategy.
And I think, again, we were fortunate that was our backgrounds, and we obviously lacked in other parts of expertise, but that was what we were, what we were good at and where our experience led. So that was, a natural thing to do. I think I work with lots and lots of SaaS startups as customers. I do some angel investing. And I think one of the things that I see most frequently on the sales side is particularly where there's technical founders, right? As you say, like you almost want, there's an aversion to sales, and let's build with product-led growth. And as you say, that's not necessarily quite as easy or quite the nirvana as anticipated, or there's very little thought given to sales. We're going to build this great product. We'll create some marketing leads, and then we'll get a salesperson or two, and they can close all the revenue. And it's like it's almost like an afterthought. And how could that possibly go wrong? And as we know, that's it is much more difficult than that. But as I say, we built that business purely. Well, almost purely based on on outbound. That being every channel, it was phone, it's email, it's LinkedIn, it's social selling, it's all of those channels combined, but with an outbound motion and a real leaning towards an outbound team. And actually, our spend and our growth came from continuing to invest and grow the outbound team more than it came from a marketing led or even product led.
I see. And for anyone listening to this that maybe is just starting to get an outbound approach set up or thinking of trying an outbound approach, perhaps if they haven't had that product led success that they were perhaps promised, what advice would you give someone just starting out with outbound that hasn't got that prior experience?
Well, I mean, first of all, like anything, like all of the other approaches, it's hard, right? And I think, an acceptance is hard. There's an argument. It's harder than ever right now. I think there are also some arguments that it's easier than ever right now because there's so much unpersonalized crap that comes into our inboxes and LinkedIn that it's easier to stand out in some ways than ever before. But it's definitely it is hard, and I think particularly where there is no sales background, how do you hire someone onboard them, coach them to be great, and and again, without being a plug for what we do at MySalesCoach, that's part of the reason that that we launched and looked to solve that problem. Because if you haven't got that expertise internally, it does become very difficult to do that. I think in terms of some of the things that I see that make that outbound work and make that outbound work in teams is first of all, in those early days, and if it's founder led sales, look for repeatability, not scalability. Right, that there is a process and numbers that you have confidence that you could bring someone in to they might not be as good as you, they'll never know the product, the offering and the market maybe quite as well as you, or that takes time, but there is an absolute process that someone can come in and repeat and expect success to happen on the back of that if they do those certain things. And making sure that sales process is really repeatable rather than scalable. Like, people talk about scalability very early on, but don't use the word repeatability as much. That sales process in the early days is all about repeatability, of knowing that if I get to talk to this number of people, if I send this number of emails, if I send this number of LinkedIn, I know what is likely to happen as a result. I can then identify if someone else is coming in and following that process and not getting the same results. I can really just laser in on, okay, what are they doing differently? Why are they not getting as much success from their LinkedIn messages or their social selling or their LinkedIn voice notes or their cold calling or whatever? I can really laser focus on where I can see they're not getting the same results, and I can see there's an issue, and then look to what are they doing differently as part of that process, or where do I need to coach them and improve their skills so that I narrow that gap between that founder-led sales and those first sales hires.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree, and think that's a very good insight, is that repeatability should definitely come before that scalability, because otherwise you've got no baseline, you've got nothing to compare against. It's hard to improve. Everything will just happen kind of organically and semi-randomly, won't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, on to MySalesCoach then. What was we've obviously all talked about the first to second startup transition. What was the second to third startup transition like, then going from Refract to MySalesCoach?
So probably worth just touching on, how that acquisition came about and
Yeah.
some of the experiences post-acquisition there as well. So I think this is where it was, as I say, it was more orthodox, and there's definitely some takeaways, hopefully, in what I'm about to share here as well. So reasonably early in Refract's journey, and I'd done my first bits of angel investing, and one of the companies I angel invested in, they got an amazing offer from a really well-funded US business that was like 25 times revenue or something like that, because that was how they were valued back in the day. For the younger members of the audience, that was a 25 times revenue was a thing once, and I thought, well, we've got some competitors. We had a couple of really well-funded competitors. In fact, to put it in perspective, even though all we did was, I say all we did, we analysed sales conversations. Our biggest competitor had the same market cap as Sainsbury's, as a business, and the funding that they had. And I thought, we've got some big competitors. We've got some competitors that have got amazing valuations.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that everyone who is a potential acquirer in our competitors, in adjacent markets, in markets that I can see coming into this area in the future, knows who we are. So I had a mad mental 2 weeks that was not very well planned, where I just flew around the US, having told every CEO, I'm in your town, be great to meet up for a coffee, love to have a strategic introduction or something like that. Was my a little like hint, so that I wanted to know that whenever any of those were thinking of expanding into this vertical, expanding into Europe, etc., that they knew us, that they knew me, that they knew why this maybe is a name that they should be thinking around the board table. And that worked brilliantly, because it ended up 3 of those companies we ended up in conversations around acquisition at various times around, and that would definitely be my takeaway and advice. One of those companies was a company called Lego. I'd walked out of a Lego's offices, phoned my co-founder and said, this is the company that's going to acquire us one day. And indeed, it was nearly 2 years later, but that is exactly what happened. And then went through, I was with Lego I stayed with Lego for a couple of years after we were acquired, really learned a lot about, working for a much bigger SaaS business, and took a lot of lessons away from that.
Interesting. So it sounded like, there was a pretty clear strategy then. It was looking for potential acquirers, be that, competitors or others in the space that had a sufficiently high valuation themselves, but also kind of valuation multiple on revenue then. And you were then looking to basically build that awareness then at the high level within those companies that you thought would essentially give you a good acquisition price on revenue.
So it started like that. It started with that thinking, and then it became like, who might we want to be acquired with? Who might we be an amazing fit for? And it really just became, I need to know our potential acquirers now. I need to make sure that when they're thinking of this space or this region or growing or whatever it might be, that our name is being mentioned in that conversation, and that at least we have the choice or the conversation. Or I didn't want to miss out on the conversation because, frankly, they'd never really heard of us, or we just didn't have a relationship and we weren't being thought of, or we weren't top of mind. I felt compelled to make sure that everyone that I thought could acquire us, and I'm talking about, like, there was 20 companies I saw over that couple of weeks, that they all knew who I was, who we were, and that I had a relationship. That included, as I say, every competitor and everyone in the adjacent markets.
And if that kind of first startup acquisition then was mainly technology based to accelerate their timelines, what do you think that kind of motivation was for the acquisition of this one?
So well, I'm going to say maybe 3 or 4-fold. It was, again, far more orthodox. We were, at the time we were acquired, we were growing at, just around 100%, year on year. We'd really, we'd come out of COVID, and really that combination of post-COVID product market fit, starting to really know what we're doing, flywheel working. We were having strong success at that point. Obviously, with a lot of great clients, and now some more meaningful revenue. Obviously, the team, but also the technology. So again, thinking about our acquirers, the value of that technology was different depending on the acquirer. If it was a competitor, it might be one thing. If it was someone in an adjacent market who the value proposition of putting together what we did, which essentially known as sales conversation intelligence or revenue intelligence, and what they did, if those two things brought together magic as well as as upsell, and that was the case with our acquirer Lego. So they're a sales enablement company. So for those maybe not familiar with sales enablement, all around the onboarding, the training, the learning for organizations, sales teams. If we could take what is actually happening in people's frontline sales conversations and pinpoint the learning, the training, the coaching, the onboarding that will most accelerate their journey, that was a truly unique proposition. So it was then became all of those things, but it was product, it was team, it was revenue, it was customers.
Yeah,
and geographic as well. And they were US based, didn't have a European presence, so geography played a part there as well.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think that geography part, especially for UK founders, is worth considering, worth looking at. Is what are those US companies that may be at that right scale to acquire you? That for them, an entry into geography is a pretty major tick box, and then all of the other elements that you just mentioned that come alongside with that as well, just making it a far more attractive proposition for them.
Exactly. And it was the combination. It was, as I say, far more orthodox. It was the combination of all of those things that that's why I walked out of their building 2 years before and predicted that this was going to happen, because it just felt like it was all there, as well as and all these things sound cheesy, but it was totally real. The fit of culture, the fit between myself as a founder and the founder of that business. It just felt like it was all there, and that's totally how it came to pass. And that was why I was there for a couple of years, and enjoyed two great years post acquisition, where I loved being part of that team and loved the learning that I went through there as well. Yeah,
and it sounds like a very kind of well aligned and positive experience. The best kind of acquisition you would hope for.
It totally was. It was the right thing for us to do. It was the right thing. We were unanimous as a management team about doing. We had options and choices. Obviously, at that time, we were growing fast. We were still fairly early in our journey. It was definitely we definitely had choices at that moment. But it was 100%. We've all been delighted. It's played out the way that we hoped.
Yeah, fantastic. So, I guess with two startups, that sounds like a pretty massive journey and couple of journeys already. Then, so why go in for a third run? What are you hoping to get out of this kind of process and experience with MySalesCoach?
So I think the real drivers of as I say, I did really think about do I want to am I ready for another journey and everything that goes in that, and the couple of compelling things. One, I think I felt a real frustration that I hadn't solved the problem that we set out to solve at Refract. We kind of pivoted away from that, and that problem still existed, and no one else had solved it either. So I felt a real compelling need to come back to that. I think also that you've gone through the journey, and then even post acquisition, how much you've learned, how much better you would do things.
I see.
I definitely did things a lot better second time round. I very much hope that I'll do things even better again third time round. It felt like a real waste to not put those learnings and those experiences into action. And then, as I said early on, I think in the podcast, I think there is a bit of addiction. I think there is a kind of like. I tell you what, I actually found really, really difficult, and I haven't probably admitted this publicly anywhere before. After we were acquired, and people said, "What do you do?" I never knew how to answer that question, because I was like, it's part of my identity. It's not in a boastful, showing off. I mean,
No,
I
no.
used to always play down. I have I started a small SaaS company, or people that didn't know, SaaS software company, or
Yeah.
whatever. And but that was part of my identity. I definitely found after we were acquired, and people said, "Oh, well, having that conversation. What do you do?" I was like, I don't know how to answer this anymore. Like,
Mm.
I'm actually a general manager for Europe of a software company. I was never comfortable with that label, and I think I felt I lost part of my identity. Not that I struggled, as I say, I really enjoyed that 2 years.
Yeah.
But I think being a founder is just ingrained in my identity, and I'm sure a lot of the people listening here. And it's hard to it's hard not to be a founder.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly completely resonate with that, and know many people in this audience that certainly would as well. I think it would definitely be hard, certainly for me personally, not to imagine myself in a position where I was doing something with one type of company or another.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's part of who we are. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, my sales coach. I know we kind of mentioned it briefly early on, but just give people a bit of an overview of what the premise is and how it operates as a platform.
Yeah, so I think joining the dots here, you can kind of sort of like see I had this frustration about solving this same problem. I started looking at what was happening in other industries, and started looking at things like mental health and well-being, for example, where there's some really successful big companies that are delivering one-to-one personalized virtual coaching
Yeah,
as a subscription service, created great brands, and essentially, kind of, I'm going to describe it as like half marketplace, half SaaS. That there is
yeah,
a platform, there is a subscription, it's a SaaS go to market, but it's also a little bit of marketplace of putting together best coaches with a brand and a subscription service. I looked into the success of those companies. I actually even applied for a CEO job at one of those companies, just to find out a little bit more and understand that market.
yeah,
And that's when I kind of became. This is the answer to the problem that I've been, spent half my life, half my working life trying to
yeah, yeah,
solve. And I just felt like at that moment, I was like, I need to do this, and I need to do this now. And yeah, that was when my sales coach was born. I agreed
yeah,
to stay with the Lego for another 6 months in order to make sure, obviously, that was all done in the best way. But I think as well that kind of mentally gave me 6 months of runway to kind of plan out in my head what
I
was this
see.
going to look like. And I definitely felt, that I think, one of the things that we've shared publicly is, we grew faster in the first 2 months of my sales coach as we did in the first 2 years of Refract.
Wow.
With this story told, you can kind of see why all of those things are. It took longer at Refract. It took longer to find product market fit.
Yeah,
It took, there were challenges and pivots that we still needed to take. Here at My Sales Coach, we had that 6 months worth of planning. I say we, with myself and my co-founder who came with me from Allego.
yeah.
We had that 6 months worth of planning in our head. We had the experiences that we've gone through, and we were able to achieve. We've been able to achieve a lot more, a lot quicker.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can certainly see that. Yeah, there must be so many of those kind of big picture lessons and things learned, but also kind of micro experience as well, that coming in third time round would give you a massive head start over anyone coming in fresh from it. And yeah, I think one thing that'd be kind of interested to know is that, with a marketplace type of platform, obviously different to the previous companies, how was it jumping into that type of platform and product where you need both sides of that marketplace to exist in order for it to be sustainable and workable?
It's actually probably, in terms of the marketplace challenge, it's probably a bit of a cheat in the fact that we had a good network of great sales coaches.
Yep.
I won't say it's not easy to acquire great sales coaches, but we always kind of felt when we launched we'd have we're providing something unique of almost like a gig economy to people that maybe don't even want to run their own sales coaching business, and they don't want to invoice people and chase for
I see.
payments and find customers. They want, they want to be a great coach, and that didn't really exist. So the supply side was fairly easy. We didn't want to have a huge. We wanted. It was about quality rather than quantity. We wanted to be meaningful to a small number of coaches that we knew would be really high value, because we would live or die by the quality of our coaching. So that side was quite easy. Our go-to-market is all SaaS, and it's still it's mainly outbound. Bit more marketing this time around, but again, outbound's what we know. Outbound's definitely what we're good at, and that is our go-to-market motion. It's 100% a SaaS go-to-market motion, not a marketplace.
I see. Yeah, really, really interesting that you see it from that SaaS perspective in terms of go-to-market.
And I think this is where it's we've perhaps in the industry. Disrupting is probably a bit of a strong word, but certainly brought a different view of things like we'd look at it as your audience will as a SaaS model, where you're thinking it's all about customer acquisition costs, and could you do free trials, and as long as the customer acquisition cost works of that, then that works well. So for example, we'd embrace things like can we use scholarships as a way to get into organizations where we can actually give out free scholarships, which are almost like giving out free trials, that then lead us to then be able to grow within an organization, having proved the value. And it's again looking at maybe more of a services industry through SaaS eyes and through SaaS go-to-market dynamics and metrics that have helped us in our early success.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really interesting, a really interesting perspective that you can take. Something that is typically viewed from very service oriented perspective, but then shift that into that SaaS perspective and metrics and models of go-to-market, customer acquisition, etc. And actually, that can give a very, very different perspective in terms of your customers' eyes as to how they see their problems, and then how obviously they see you and how you're able to successfully engage with them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyone listening, we've had a couple of people in different types of marketplace businesses before, but I think you're probably the first one that's articulated a go-to-market strategy quite like this one. So I think for anyone else looking at marketplaces and other sectors and different places, it's certainly worth listening to and looking at it through that lens to see what do their numbers look like, what are the strategies that they could try if they were treating it more like a SaaS business.
I think again, part of like a very deliberate thing that we've done is that we think of ourselves as a SaaS company. And I think we are a SaaS company, but we definitely position ourselves as a SaaS company. Yeah. And even in terms of our price point, in terms of it's not a services price point. It's buying another tool in your tech stack price point. We've tried to. We know that selling SaaS products into sales teams is successful. The average SaaS sales team has 27 SaaS products. They're used to buying tech products, and they probably buy tech products and subscriptions easier than they buy services. And so therefore, even packaging it and thinking about it in that way has definitely helped us in that in that motion and in that success.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously early days in terms of time of recording this podcast into the MySalesCoach journey. And I know we've talked about the previous two companies and how they exited, but what is the plan for MySalesCoach? How do you see the next year or few years panning out, and what does that exit potentially look like, do you think?
Yeah, so I think it's as you go through more than one business, bigger and better, and taking the lessons is key. As I said, I kind of genuinely think this feels more like a lifelong passion of like, this is the problem that I've really been trying to solve for certainly half my working life. So there's a real passion about solving that problem and the value. But there is a greater ambition, to kind of put a little bit of meat on the bones. We're anticipating getting to over $1 million in revenue in our first year, which I think out the gate feels reasonably ambitious in terms of like, where do we go? Where do we go, and how can we get scale from there? It's a big market. It's a big problem that we're solving.
Yeah.
I think, definitely not thinking at this stage, obviously, in terms of like acquisitions and things, but definitely thinking. I think, my big driver is, if this is my last SaaS business, and as I say, if my wife is listening, I promise it is my last, but for everyone else, who knows? If this is my last SaaS business, I've got to have no regrets and feel like, I achieved everything in my SaaS founding world that I wanted to and that I was capable of doing. So, I like, and I get the fact as well, you're slightly more privileged as a third-time founder and taking bigger risks as well. And, I say that as someone that's, was a first-time founder and was definitely not in that position. So, that's part of the privilege, I guess, that goes with being a third-time founder as well. You've got all the learnings, you've got all the experience, you can afford to take perhaps bigger risks and chase a bigger market, a bigger prize, a bigger opportunity.
Yeah, so very, very much chasing a pretty big ambition then with this one.
It's a big universal global problem that has existed, as I say, for a long time. I've tried to solve it before, and it's existed for a long time. And I think if we achieve and get right what we want to get right, then we're solving a big global problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's great that you're in a position to not only hold that ambition, but in a perfect place by the sounds of it to drive things forward and strive to achieve that. So I think, thank you for sharing the kind of the startup journey of all of those 3 startups so far. I know it's been a whistle-stop tour, but I think there's a lot here for founders to take away from in terms of lessons learned and focus on the problem, as well as ways to think about a couple of different types of acquisitions as well, which will hopefully help them strategically think about the way that they're running their businesses. But yeah, just before we do wrap things up, is there any kind of parting advice you'd like to leave our audience with?
I think maybe just like kind of leave with from the sales side, a couple of the big things that I see happen a lot in SaaS companies, especially in those early stages, is 2 things. One is pricing, right? Just remember that pricing is the very biggest lever that you have in terms of growth. And we spend so much time talking about product and marketing and sales and customer success and all those things. Pricing is the biggest lever to growth we have, and just make sure that that gets the airtime it deserves to really consider, making sure that is adding the best value to business. And the second is being brave. Obviously we're all chasing growing a business. We desperately want to win every opportunity, particularly in those early days, win those logos. And it's so easy to concede things on negotiation because we're so desperate for that deal. Another very quick learning is we used to always do monthly subscriptions, rolling monthly subscriptions at Refract. After we acquired, we were tasked with changing that to annual subscriptions, all paid up front, and we were kind of very resistant. Like, that's not going to work. This is a big differentiator for us. A lot of kickback from the team. The founder of Lego said, "Well, I'll tell you what we do. We'll, he laughed at me and he said, "We'll double the commission for annual deals, and we'll treble it if it's annually paid up front."
Wow! Guess
what happened? Every deal was an annual deal. Most of them were paid up front. Self-limiting beliefs, because it's just hard to be brave when so much depends on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. Definitely echo all of that advice, and I think it's great advice to leave our audience with. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing that journey so far. I definitely look forward to catching up a few months down the line, seeing how my sales coach is going in terms of that global ambition. But thank you once again. Pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Inside the Scale Up. Remember, for the show notes and in-depth resources from today's guest, you can find these on the website insidethescaleup.com. You can also leave feedback on today's episode, as well as suggest guests and companies you'd like to hear from. Thank you for listening.